So once again, good morning everyone. So okay, let's start. We were talking about the Manunggul jar and what it is Manunggul jar. So Manunggul jar, it is a secondary burial jar discovered in Limon Point, Palawan at Neolithic burial site dating from 890 to 17 BC. So it is regarded a masterpiece and one of the finest Philippine pre-colonial artwork ever created. So the burial jar, which is unique in Southeast Asia, represents the early Filipino belief in life after death. So as you can see, this is the picture of Manunggul jar. So inside of the jar is lined with human bones that have been painted red. The jar was also found to be adorned with several bracelets, as is customary in Egyptian burial. So let's tackle about the design of the jar, which is the Manunggul jar. So Manunggul jar is 5.5 cm broad and 6.5 cm high. It is mostly formed of clay. It embodied carved motifs, particularly those at the jar top, were painted with pure hematite and iron. National Museum information. On the top of the jar cover, there are two human representations riding both. So there are three functions of Manunggul jar. So the Manunggul jar demonstrates how the Filipino marine culture reflected the religious belief of their forefathers. So many texts from all over the Philippines describe how souls travel to the next life on boats. So these beliefs are linked to the Anitos Austronesian beliefs. Second function of Manunggul jar is the ceramic tradition of the Si-Han civilization is thought to have reproduced this Manunggul jar. These are people who moved to southern Vietnam from Borneo, Palawan region. A man, according to early Filipino belief, is made of a body, life force, known as ginhawa and kaluluwa. So lastly, the Manunggul jar displays three faces of soul, the boatman and the boat itself. A journey to the afterlife is represented by two human figures in both. It also represents the ancient Filipino belief in life beyond death. When arranging the corpse, the front figure's hands are folded across chest, which common rituals on the Philippines. So also jar demonstrate our ties to our Southeast Asian neighbors. Different sections of the country still bear traces of their cultures and religion. It reminds us that the so-called imagined community, known as the Filipino nation, can have foundation prior to the internet. Trade, information, and the communication were carried over the seas and rivers. Southeast Asia produced the first sophisticated marine culture in the Philippines archipelago. Manunggul jar demonstrate how important maritime culture is to us, as it reflects our forefather religious beliefs. Our forefathers thought that man was made of three parts: the body, the ginhawa, and kaluluwa. So these lines represent the ancient of the Filipino belief in life beyond death. It demonstrates the early Filipinos' notions of death, their ways for them to interact with their deceased relatives. Many indigenous groups in the Philippines still practice this Filipino culture today. Okay, so let's continue about the cholera epidemic in the Philippines. Lesson 15 in the Torrentera. So, for you, what is cholera? So cholera means it is a deadly disease, which is cholera endemic, was assured by the Philippines. So the disease was really made a great impact on the way of living throughout the community, in the sense that cholera doesn't mean any standard way of living. So it may occur wherever it takes place. For instance, I've observed that endemics is one of the deadliest epidemics in the history of the Philippines. So cholera disease was still existing and it was an outbreak in the community. It is threatening disease and is triggered every individual's life. So one word or phrase that stuck me or affected me as a student, that is poor sanitation, diarrhea, vomiting, and muscle cramps. So the epidemic is an outbreak of disease that affects many in the population and begins to spread rapidly. Also, it is an outbreak of disease is considered as epidemic if it affects certain number of people within a short period of time, typically within 2 weeks. So, the cholera outbreak in local, it is in Caraga Oriental, national, Cameron, international, the first cholera pandemic. So, 6 people have died due to the cholera outbreak in Caraga town in Davao Oriental, which started on January 31, 2022. Health authorities have become more concerned about the cholera outbreak that is sweeping the country. So the first cholera pandemic emerged at the Ganges Delta with outbreak Jessore, India in 1817, stemming from contaminated rice. So the relation of the topic being read or discussed place where the disease falls of the cholera epidemic in the Philippines were most closely in contaminated food. Okay, so let's proceed. The Little Tokyo of the pre-war Philippines. So, what is the Little Tokyo of the pre-war Philippines? So, Davao City and Japan share a rich historical bond more than a century ago. There was a thriving community of around 300,000 Japanese in Davao. They left behind a long-lasting legacy that influences us to this day. It can be said that they set up the broad stroke for such modern Davao development. One of the early Japanese settlers was Ota Kyubaboro. So, who is Kyota Okaboro? A Japanese entrepreneur who shortly after the turn of the 20th century migrated to Davao City and cultivated vast lands around the shores of Davao Gulf into abaca and coconut plantations, and who is considered by the local historians of the father of Davao development. Ota Kyubaboro is born in Hyogo, Japan in February 1876. Established the Auto Development Company, the first Japanese abaca plantation company in the Philippines in May 3, 1907. He also established several other companies such as Mental Plantation Company, Riverside Plantation Company, Taloco River Plantation Company, Wenga Plantation Company, and was instrumental in Davao economic growth and prosperity. He died in Kyoto, Japan in October 31, 1917 at age at 41. So how this issue affect you as a student? So the activity aimed to collect stories about the village from families who live in the area before, during, and after the Japanese occupation. The objective was to trace back history and identify landmarks that have heritage importance. Davao is a city of migrants, of people who have settled from all over the Philippines. Among the earliest and most influential migrant groups were the Japanese. They deserve more thanks and recognition for their legacy and what they receive today. So these places are just waiting for you to lead in its rediscovery. So let's proceed again about the minutes of the proceeding of the national territory of the 1971 Constitutional Conversation, Lesson 11 in the Torrentera. Okay, so meeting minutes. Minutes are an official record of acts taken by the board or committee at a meeting, not a record of everything said. They serve a historical purpose, but they also serve a legal purpose by documenting the group's adherence to the right procedures and by the laws of the association. Okay, so national territory. So in the national territory, the Philippine archipelago is the initial component of the national territory, followed by all the other area over which the Philippines has sovereign or jurisdiction. And finally, all teach us about the three components of the national territory, the terrestrial domain, the river domain, and the aerial domain. Instead of being separated into 7, 107 island of the Philippines archipelago is regarded one integrated unit, with the outermost of the archipelago connected by a straight baseline and all inside the baseline considered to be internal waters of the Philippines. So, amendments. The word amendment, it is based on the verb to amend, which means to change for the better. An amendment is a minor change or addition designed to improve. So 2012 Scarborough Shoal Standoff. So this is the example of the national territory. 2012 Scarborough Shoal Standoff. Example is the growing threat in maritime conflicts, such as after the Scarborough Standoff in 2012, where Filipino fishermen were forcibly turned away by Chinese maritime surveillance vessels and construction of artificial island over disputed islands. This provoked the Philippines government to file an arbitration case in 2013 to justify its claim, and by 2016, the tribunal's decision is in favor of the Philippines and China has violated the country's sovereign rights.
So thank you for watching and listening to my vlogs. God bless.